So Trump, apparently everything went according to plan yesterday. He was indicted, officially arraigned in federal court in Florida yesterday, and I think right after that he had a rally, or if not a rally, he gave a public speech before a few hundred supporters. And what do I think about that? Well, Well, first of all, as I've always said, I don't hate Donald Trump. I'm a Democrat, but I don't hate Donald Trump. And for a lot of people, those two things are mutually incompatible. I mean, how can you be a Democrat and not hate Donald Trump? How can you be a Democrat and make any arguments at all in support of Donald Trump in that situation, right? And it's a good question. I mean, I can only tell you what my heart feels, right? My heart feels that I don't hate this human being. I know that he's an imperfect human being, and that's putting it nicely. I know. I know he's done many things, and he has certainly said a lot of things that I hope I would never even think, never mind to say in my life. He's done a lot of wrongdoing. He definitely is not probably going to go to heaven like most other people. And but who am I to say that? I don't know. I really don't know who he is inside. I know what he said. I know how it appears. And he has done a lot of things. He's pushed things to the brink. He has his brinksmanship has brought him to the brink of you know prison. So now what? So now, I where we were this morning, the day after his official arraignment on federal charges, I still think that the most of the charges will not hold. I think they're saying that he was charged under the Espionage Act. I don't see how that can be a successful charge. I mean, because I don't think they have any evidence that there was no wartime slash selling out of America's secret to slash America's enemies, etc., etc. So I'm not an expert on the Espionage Act, obviously, or any of this at all. This is just me, just talking very superficially about stuff. But I don't think that he's going to look. I don't want him to be president again. I look at all of these people in the Republican Party. My argument is not their argument. They're coming at this from a completely different place, right? I don't want Donald Trump to ever be president again. I think he should be disqualified from any public office for the rest of his life because I don't think he has the right temperament that the country needs to bring the country together, to heal the country, etc., etc. He has some ideas that I think are might be good ideas in terms of economic ideas, money making ideas, even some foreign policy ideas. But in terms of his domestic policy, he's bad for the country. He's not good for the country. I don't want him to be president. I don't want him to be president. I can't say that enough. But at the same time, there's one little small part of my brain that still thinks, like a lawyer. And I always look for the legal arguments that can be made in a situation on behalf of a client, right? And here, I definitely don't think that the Espionage Act fits what he did. But I also don't think that his defense that these were presidential records will work either, because these clearly were not presidential records. These were documents, official documents relating to the United States um, military plans and so on and so forth. So these are not presidential records to which he had any right at all. But as commander in chief of the armed forces while president, he did have a right to possession of the classified documents pertaining to the U.S. military. Did he have the right to transfer those documents from the White House or from a government venue to his private residence at Mar-a-Lago and worse, in the bathroom in the auditorium? I mean, obviously, probably not. Probably not. Okay. I am not privy to how classified documents should be handled. I don't know what that procedure is, but I'm thinking that that procedure says something to the effect of you can't take these documents out of specific government locations. I'm thinking it says that. So him transferring all of these documents to Mar-a-Lago and storing them where he stored them is obviously a difficulty, but I think it's something that can be overcome with the argument that at the time he did that, he was commander in chief and he made an executive decision while commander in chief to transfer these documents for his own subjective reasons. And while those reasons may not make sense to the average person, he was not, at the time he did this, an average person. He acted in the capacity of the commander in chief. Okay, now, once he was no longer the commander in chief, and that probably happened a few weeks after he made this very astonishing decision to move these documents, he was asked to return the documents. And at that point is where he got into trouble because he refused to return the documents. And he refused to return the documents for a very long time, for over a year, even after he received a subpoena. This is where I think he got in trouble. This is the obstruction of justice charge. It's not the espionage charge that's going to get him in serious trouble. It's the obstruction charge. Because for the life of me, no matter how I rack my brain backwards, forwards, up and down, I don't know how do you argue that he did not obstruct justice here, because they weren't his documents. They were the documents of the United States. This is clear, right? It's barely possible to argue that he had any right at all to transfer those documents even while he was a commander in chief, but we can make a very sort of tenuous, light argument that yes, he did have the right, the plenary right, to handle these classified documents and do as he chose or as he deemed fit to with these documents at that time. But once he was no longer commander in chief and he was holding on to these documents, which clearly did not belong to him, they were not his personal effects and they were not his presidential records either. They had nothing to do with his records. They were clearly documents belonging to the government of the United States, and he didn't return those documents. He obstructed justice. Even after he received a subpoena, a year after being asked nicely to return documents, he obstructed justice. And the consequence for, or the penalties for obstruction of justice in a criminal case can be can be a fine and or prison time ranging anywhere from, I think, 3 years to 20 years in some instances. So, he's looking at a fine for sure. I'm sure they're going to charge him, and potentially some jail time for obstruction of justice. I think rather than risk that, he should plead out of the case. I still think from the very beginning, and I'm just an amateur, but it seems to me that he should get all the other charges dropped, first of all, and plead to obstructing justice and agree to be disqualified from office because he could win, right? And that's leverage. And I think that the fact that he got into the race as early as he did for some people was comical. I think it was very, very clever, right? Because now it gives him some leverage. So now use that leverage to get out of this situation. He has to relinquish any idea of being president again, right? And he needs to agree to apologize publicly for this obstruction and to apologize for January 6th and to apologize for saying that the election was rigged. If he's willing to do those three things and agree to be disqualified from running for public office from now until the rest of his life on earth, I think he might have a chance of spending the rest of his life playing golf and becoming once again a real estate titan and getting his life back and letting go of all of these grudges that drive him and propels him to want to get his revenge. That is going to get him probably in a federal penitentiary for years, which he may even die there, which is stupid, right? Which is stupid. I mean, he cannot overcome the obstruction of justice charge. in my opinion, in my humble opinion. And so if I were him, that would be where I'm trying to negotiate out. I would get all the other charges dropped. He didn't commit espionage. The Espionage Act has nothing to do with what he did here. This is ridiculous, right? And all the other this, that, and retention, whatever. It's the obstruction of justice. And he needs to plead this out.